America's epidemic of police brutality isn't just a problem in our streets, it's also in our schools. And there's really no fun way to talk about it. But I asked Mike Brown to try.
After a summer of uprisings calling to end police brutality, the call to defund police is also in our schools. Why? Because 47% of public schools have cops called SROs. And they're just like the police outside of schools. They have guns, can arrest, and often put black and brown children in dangerous and sometimes fatal situations.
First one officer, then two, appearing to body slam a 14-year-old.
When the deputy grabs and drags the student from her chair,
"You're done. You're done."
So I sat down with experts, educators, and even high schoolers to find out an answer to a very serious question.
What kind of bullshit is happening in schools?
I mean, it is nuts. We have to address the fact that our schools have become the locations for criminalization and not necessarily the locations for learning that we intend them to be.
And young people aren't happy with cops in schools either.
Every encounter I've had with a police officer has been bad. 5th grade was the first time I had multiple assault rifles pointed at me by an officer.
Damn.
So it's imperative that we get these officers out of our brown and black schools, because the same police officers harassing us in our neighborhoods are the same officers who are in our schools.
Are there any good reasons for SROs to be in schools?
Take that as a no.
Dream's right, but only a few people are listening. So we're gonna take you back to your childhood and educate you the only way you used to learn anything. Schoolhouse Rock style. Cops in schools don't give black and brown kids any relief. Boom, 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 boom. That's why it's time to say, ouch! Expel the police. That was good, right? Why are there so many police officers in public school?
A lot of it had to do with the Great Migration. Historically, when black people were fleeing the Jim Crow South and moving up north, there was a fear that black people were going to take over, and that's when you see more and more officers in schools.
Despite a long racist history, SROs really became prevalent in the 90s, presumably because Michelle Pfeiffer wasn't available to teach at every school.
We started to see more police in schools after the Gun-Free Schools Act in response to school shootings. But when we look at the data, it shows that the police were put in schools that were mostly black and brown.
But that doesn't make sense to me. If you're gonna respond to mass shootings and say, let's put some SROs in the school, why are you putting them in schools where there aren't predominantly mass shootings?
Because there was an overarching idea that there were young people who needed to be controlled.
An idea that black and brown children are so inherently violent without police there, they would tear each other down.
And what do we call that, kids?
That's racist!
That's right. And in some instances, cops aren't making a difference in school shootings.
So what are they there for?
Cops in schools is really about the school-to-prison pipeline.
Hold on a second. There's gonna be a lot of people watching this who are just
No
like,
doubt.
there is a pipeline?
Right. I mean, the school-to-prison pipeline is very real. It's just a myriad of policies like metal detectors, police presence, random searches, and then there's zero-tolerance discipline policies. These demand that students get suspended and pushed out of the classroom. We know that when students are suspended, they're much more likely to end up in that prison cell.
When we talk about legacy admissions, this isn't what we had in mind. And these rules just don't result in suspensions. In some cases, because of police presence in schools, BIPOC students skip the pipeline altogether and go straight to jail. What part of the game is that?
There was a black student who was charged with a felony assault for discharging fart spray.
Ooh, say what?
I mean, it was a dumb thing to do, I'll give you that.
It's a prank.
I mean, things that used to be solved by getting your parent called are now being handled by police.
And this dehumanization of young people leads to our erasure of their childhood, criminalizing them for normal adolescent behavior.
There was a 6-year-old girl who had a temper tantrum. A police officer handcuffed her, took her down to the juvenile detention center where he fingerprinted her, took her mug shot.
And she was 6?
6-year-old girl.
Come on. Thankfully, kids like Nathaniel are rewriting the narrative. He persuaded the Minneapolis School Board to cut ties with the police by collecting 1,800 signatures from his fellow students.
That is a lot for a student to be doing right now.
Yeah, organizing is like, it's tiring.
It's not just like being on Twitter, it's like real work that you're doing?
Get this boy some rest. But the fight isn't over. That's why Dream is fighting to get them out of Chicago schools too.
Being oppressed will make you fight for your life. And that's what we are doing. We're fighting for our life. And if you do not believe in Black youth now, you're going to have another generation who would have to deal with all of this trauma. We know what we need, and that is resources, not to be police.
Wow, Dream was preaching.
Well, them white people need to hear it.
White people need to hear a lot of things, like the fact that 14 million students are in schools that lack a counselor or nurse, but can still fund SROs.
And of course, when it comes to stuff like the budget, it's a really boring conversation, but it's like a budget is a moral document.
Yeah.
Money is being siphoned out of education and into prisons. You know, just a few blocks from where I teach, they built a $200 million jail for kids.
What?
If we had $200 million to invest in trauma counseling, in lowering class sizes, in mentorship, after-school programs, we wouldn't have any kids in that jail because they would all be thriving.
We can do it. We've got to invest in it. I don't think that young people today are different than the young people of yesterday. If we invest in them with love, then we're investing in a society that I want to be a part of.
So class, what did we learn?
About the police!
And?
The police means putting education!
And?
You can sing!
If you liked this video, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments below. And if you didn't like this video, I'm sure you've already left a comment. Thank you so much.